Welcome to Jer-Lindy Farms. My name is Jerry Jennison, and I'm going to be your tour guide today. All tools provided to us in the last 50 years by modern science that help us to produce what I believe to be the best quality, safest food at the lowest cost to the environment in the history of this planet. And I'm proud of that. I want to share that with you. And so the rule that we have is this, is that if you have a question on this tour, you need to ask it. Don't raise your hand, just ask it, because any questions you have about what we're doing is more important to me than anything that I'm saying. And so we're going to walk towards the calves on this tour, and the first thing you need to know is that for every pound of milk that we get from our cows, we're getting about 3.5 pounds of poop. So keep that in mind when you're putting your feet on the ground. But the cool thing about that is that poop has all the nitrogen, phosphorus, and potash that our plants that we're growing to feed the cows need for fertilizer, and it's the only fertilizer we use. So we treat it as the resource that it is. A lot of research and science being done right now on manure and its importance in soil health. And some scientists have said that it's possible, they believe, that at some point we may just value manure from a dairy cow as having more value than the milk she's producing because of its benefits to soil health. So we're careful with it. We treat it as the resource that it is. And, but you still need to know where you're putting your feet on the ground. So our tour starts by the calves. And it's important to know that a calf on our dairy farm and on dairy farms all over the world, when they're born, will spend just a few hours with their mama, their dam, they're called, and then we separate them. And we separate them for two important reasons. Number one, we're dairy farmers. In order to make a living, we've got to sell milk. And we don't want to create stress between that cow and her calf. And so separating them quickly reduces stress, and then the cow can get down to the business of making milk. The other reason is that when that calf is born, its immune system is completely inactive. It takes about 2 weeks for that to get really going. So the longer you leave that with a mature animal, the more likely it is to pick up an adult-born disease. So we separate them. We bring the cow into the barn. We'll sanitize her teats and collect the colostrum, which is the first milk that she produces. And then we'll feed that to the calf, and that's important because the colostrum has all the antibodies that that calf needs to survive until her own immune system gets going. After that, she's going to get fed pasteurized whole milk twice a day. Sometimes in the winter when it's cold, she'll get it 3 times a day. But at every milking, we know which cows in our barn are producing our best quality milk and which ones are producing our lowest quality milk. We get paid both on quality and quantity, so if we can separate out the poorest quality, we'll pasteurize that, feed it to the calves, we get paid more. But the milk that we separated out is still good product, and we pasteurize it and it gets fed to the calves. And they'll do really well on it. Then they also get fed cereal, free choice. A cereal that is corn, oats, soybeans, molasses to make it taste good. It's about 22% protein, and they get as much of that as they want, so that by the time they're about 49 days old, they're going to be eating approximately 5 pounds a day of that and gaining 2 to 2.5 pounds of weight every day. Then we'll take the milk away from them, switch them over to water, and they'll get ready to move from the calf hutches. But before they do, our veterinarian will visit them. She comes once a month on what we call a herd health visit, and one of her stations is to visit the calves. She'll start them on a vaccination protocol, much like humans, only a longer list of diseases that she will vaccinate for. And she dehorns them, unlike humans. When a calf is born, and a ruminant is going to grow horns. And we can't have that because they'll learn how to use those horns on each other and sometimes on us. So we got to have them off. So our veterinarian will take care of that. She'll give them a local anesthetic, find the horn bud, and then burn the nerves around the horn bud with a dehorning iron. Takes about 6 seconds per calf, and it still hurts. But when a calf is done, she'll let it loose from the restraining device that she has. It'll run into the hutch, do a circle, and immediately run back out looking for its next bottle of milk. And that's about how long it bothers it. They'll get their picture taken also while they're out here, because on a Holstein, their markings are just like your thumbprint. They're positive identification their whole life. We'll attach that picture to an application for registry, which includes all of their breeding information, send that into the Holstein Association of America where they're recorded, and then we can trace their family tree back to the late 1800s if we wanted to. Every female calf is given an ear tag at birth that has 4 pieces of information on it. The top number, her birth date. The next number is just the chronological number for the next female. The bottom number is the National Association of Animal Breeders code for her sire, her papa. And on the back side of the tag is her mama's name, so we always know who we've got when we're dealing with them out here. So when they're about 70 days old, they'll move from the calf hutches to what we call the super hutch. And 2 things happen here. Number 1, they learn to socialize with each other. And then the thing that makes them important to us as human beings and our food system happens. When they get here, they're introduced to a green plant. And it's because of their ability to efficiently digest plants that make them so important to us. Their digestive system, completely different than ours, has 4 compartments in it. The one that's really important, called the rumen. When they get here, it's not much larger than my fist, and bacteria are already starting to develop in the rumen. As they grow, the rumen gets to be about this large, can hold up to 50 gallons, and it's literally filled with billions of bacteria. And it's the bacteria that will digest the cellulose, the lignin, and the components of the plant that we cannot digest. And then as the bacteria pass through the next 2 compartments, the omasum and the abomasum, more like ours, they will digest the bacteria, turning it into the highest quality protein and energy food that we have found on this planet, and that's milk. Milk's still the only food we know of that a human being can survive on, has all the essential nutrients, vitamins, energy, protein that we need to survive. And then they also produce beef, and then about 400 other products that we use, and then the material that comes out the back then becomes the fertilizer for the next year's plants that will grow to feed them. And then a product comes out the front called methane. And indeed, methane, a greenhouse gas that is about 23 times more powerful than CO2. A couple of things that you don't hear about though. Methane has a life expectancy of about 10 years, and then it breaks down into the environment, unlike CO2, which has a life expectancy of at least 1,000 years. Every bit of CO2 that we produce by burning fossil fuels is still in the environment. But methane is always regenerating, recirculating, and the CO2 that it becomes as it breaks down then becomes the CO2 that the plants that are growing must have in order to grow. And they're not producing more CO2 than the plants that are growing that need that. And in fact, since the year 2002, the United States livestock industry has actually produced less CO2 each year, or less methane, than the year before. And that's total, not per animal or per pound of food. Total CO2 emissions have dropped. And in fact, we also believe that by the year 2050, we will go negative. As animals become more efficient, the plants that are growing will need more CO2 than they can produce, and they will become, actually they already are, a part of the solution and not the problem. Some scientists have called ruminants the most important animal on the planet for the development of the human species. Always makes me proud to be able to take care of an animal quite like that. Probably the most efficient food producing animal on the planet. So when they're about 6 months old, they'll move from the super hutch to what we call the heifer barn. And then our veterinarian visits them again, and she'll give them a booster shot for some of the diseases she vaccinated them for as calves, and then she vaccinates them for a zoonotic disease. Ruminants can carry up to about 15 different zoonotic diseases. About half of them can be transferred through milk from infected cows. And what is zoonosis? Zoonosis is the ability for a disease to transfer across species. And the important thing you need to know, that when you buy pasteurized milk at the store, 100% of that has been killed. And we have over 100 years of good science that shows how safe pasteurized milk is. Then they'll move over to that side, and there they reach a landmark age for us, and that is 13 months. I said earlier that we have to sell milk to make a living. In order to get them to produce milk, they must go through pregnancy. Pregnancy induces lactation. And so at about 13 months old, they've reached the age where they're mature enough to achieve pregnancy. So as a farmer, we start to watch them for signs of estrus. Farmers call it being in heat, in order to achieve them to realize a pregnancy. And that's how it happens over there. And then they'll move again. So the goal is to achieve pregnancy over there, and then they move here. And everybody here is pregnant. And so the diet in front of them, formulated specifically by a ruminant nutritionist to have all the vitamins, minerals, energy, protein that a pregnant cow needs to grow the calf, give birth, and move into lactation, is here. And our ruminant nutritionist visits us at least once every 2 weeks. And he'll walk every pen that's here. He'll check their body condition. He'll sometimes feel the manure to feel how much fiber is left in it, so he gets an idea of how well they're digesting their feed. He'll take samples of any feed that we grew, send it into a lab, and it'll be analyzed for about 65 different nutrients. And if I need to make a change to any group's recipe, their feed ration, and every group has a different ration depending on their needs, he'll email me a recipe within about 48 hours so that I get it right as quickly as possible. So we want our cows to have their calves in this pen. And then we'll separate the calf from the cow here, and the cow will move into our hospital barn, which is where we'll go next. So this is our hospital barn. So the cow will have the calf outside. They're separated, and the cow is brought in here. We want them to have their calf outside, and then we'll bring the cow in here into our hospital barn. Even though we work hard every day to keep cows healthy and to do our best for them, we know that in the 2 weeks after having a calf, they will suffer a majority of the health trouble they'll have their entire life. So having a place where we can watch them, keep them separated, is important. So every day, these are the first cows to be milked. They'll be walked out of here to the milking parlor, milked, inspected. If we see anything that we need to pay attention to, we can address it here. And once we feel that they've overcome the difficulties that calving can bring, then they'll move out into the lactating barn with the rest of the cows. But till then, they'll stay here. So this is our milking parlor. It's a double-8 herringbone. Double-8, of course, means that there's 8 cows on each side, so we can milk 16 cows at a time. Herringbone refers to this bar up front, the zigzag bar shaped like the bone in a herring fish, and it's designed to position cows for milking. So at milking time, we'll shut the front gate of the parlor. We'll open the back gate. We'll roll that curtain up, and our cows will be in the holding area. And if we had the curtain up, you would note that the holding area has a floor that slopes down to the back. And that's because cows like to stand uphill. So they'll always face the milking parlor. And when we open that gate, it'll take about 8 seconds for 8 cows to get in here. Some of the first ones will literally be running because they know that milking relieves pressure on their udder and it feels good. And the first cow will come and stand with her chest, her brisket, in that first bend in the bar. The next cow will come right alongside of her to the next bend. Don't have to train her, they do that naturally. And that'll do two things. It'll push her over, so have easy access to her udder right here, and it'll give her a squeeze. And that squeeze is important. And a lady named Temple Grandin helped confirm what farmers kind of knew already, is that when you squeeze a cow, has the same effect as giving her a hug. Temple is a lady who, and you can watch a movie about her life. You can get it on Amazon. Temple Grandin was born autistic out in the northeast part of our country, and her mama was suggested to her by her doctor that she be institutionalized because of her severe autism. He felt that she would never learn to speak or be able to take care of herself. And her mama was one of those stubborn ladies who said, "Not my kid." And today, Temple Grandin is considered one of the world's leading resources on animal behavior. She has designed most of the animal slaughter facilities in this country and still teaching at Colorado State University. And she confirmed that when you give an animal a squeeze, has the same effect as giving it a hug, and it'll feel safe and comfortable. And that's important when you're milking a cow. And so the parlor is designed to do that. At milking time, our milkers have a strict protocol to follow to prep a cow for milking. They'll sanitize her teats and get her ready. And as soon as they touch her udder, they begin to send a message to her brain to release a hormone called oxytocin. And oxytocin will cause the muscles around the milk cells to contract to squeeze out the milk. So we'll attach the milker at that point, and then the milker takes over. There's a sensor in there that is sensing how fast milk is coming, and once the milk flow falls to less than 1 pound of milk per minute, it will automatically shut the milker off and retract it from the cow. And then we'll go back and dip her teats in an iodine solution, because the sphincter muscle on the end of that teat is wide open. It takes about 30 minutes for that to close tight, and in the meantime, it's like a superhighway for bacteria to get up into the udder and cause infection. So the iodine solution, which also has skin conditioners in it, will help protect her until that happens. Milk is flowing through this hose into a stainless steel pipeline behind that cabinet, and it will gravity flow to the back of the parlor and into a canister that is behind that horizontal canister, which also has a sensor in it that is detecting how fast that milk is coming, and that's controlling a variable speed pump that pumps that milk to the milk room where we need to cool it. When we're milking, milk is coming into this room through this pipe, and then it's going through this device here. And this is a piece of technology that is probably nearly 50 years old since it was invented. But nearly every dairy farm in the country has adapted it in some form or another. It's called a plate cooler. When milk comes out of a cow, it's going to be about 100 degrees because her body temp, normal body temp, is 101.5. We need to get that milk under 50 degrees as quickly as we can, because anything over 50 encourages bacteria to multiply rapidly. So we'll pump it through this. In our case, it has 64 stainless steel plates, and we're pumping well water alongside every other plate. Our well water here is 56 degrees year-round, and as that milk goes through there, which is going to take about 1 second, that water will take on the heat, and it will drop that milk temperature from 100 degrees to about 60. Take 40 degrees off in about 1 second. And then it'll go into one of the coolers, refrigerated bulk tanks, which are cooled with compressed Freon. And Freon is a gas that when you squeeze it, it gets cold, and that'll take the rest of the heat out, so that within about 10 minutes of leaving the cow's udder, we'll have it down to 39 degrees. And that technology, the ability to do that, took the shelf life of fluid milk at the store from 2 weeks to a full 30 days, just because farmers could cool it so quickly. The cool thing about that is that when that well water took heat out of the milk, it warmed that water from 56 degrees to about 80, and cows just love that. And so we'll plumb that water directly to their water fountains, and at milking time you can see them crowd the water fountains because they know that that's when the best water is coming. And some farmers were able to show that when they put in plate coolers, their cows gave more milk. Water is the #1 nutrient that a cow needs to produce milk, so if they drink more water, they'll give more milk. And so if you're ever concerned about whether a dairy farmer is concerned about water quality, you know that is one of their top priorities. Then the Freon took out heat also. We also pump that through a heat exchanger, which also warms water, and then that feeds our water heaters. In order to clean these pipelines, these stainless steel pipelines on the inside, takes really hot water. The fats and proteins in milk are hard to clean, so our water heaters are set at 175 degrees, as opposed to water heaters in your home, which are set at 125 degrees, so that nobody scalds themselves. You will, however, scald yourself on the hot water that's coming out of these water pipes. But it isn't costing us much to get it there, because we're using heat from the milk to get that water hot. That all being said, when we were designing Elise's cheese plant, and we were milking one morning, and it had occurred to me that why would we take 100-degree milk, cool it down to 39 degrees, send it immediately to her, and then she was going to heat it up to 145 degrees to pasteurize it. So I suggested to her that day, how about if you just get up when we do, get your equipment ready, and we will send it directly from the parlor to you, and then you can pasteurize it. And she laughed, and she said, well, that's because I don't want to get up that early every day. But it didn't take her very long to figure out how much money she might save. And so by 2 o'clock that afternoon, she was checking into it. She already knew that she had to be a milk hauler, licensed milk hauler, in order to take milk from us, even though she's not going to haul it in Minnesota. She has to be a licensed milk hauler. And to be a licensed milk hauler that takes milk, you cannot take milk that has not been cooled to at least 45 degrees. So one of the things she's also really good at is collaborating with people. And she immediately called the Department of Ag in St. Paul and asked for the person in charge, who they put her through to. She described to her what we were doing and asked her if she'd consider coming out here, inspecting how we were going to get milk to her, and consider giving her a waiver to that rule. So they gave her the waiver, and I think, as far as we know, Elise is the only milk hauler now in Minnesota who can take warm milk. So on the days that she's making cheese, she's getting up at 3:45 in order to get her equipment ready, and she'll send us a message, text message, that she's ready, and we'll start milking, and we will not turn the water on to the plate cooler, and the milk will go directly from the parlor through a tunnel to her pasteurization vat. And by about 6:30 in the morning, she'll have the 4,000 to 5,000 pounds of milk she needs for a batch of cheese. And by 8 o'clock, she's got it pasteurized. And by 1:30 in the afternoon, she'll have fresh cheese curds from milk that we took from the cows that morning. We think that gives her an advantage in yield and taste and quality. So now we're in the tunnel, and this is the reason why Elise was given a waiver to the milk hauler rule. It's because we could get milk from the cow, comes down through here, through a stainless steel pipeline, goes through the wall at the end of the tunnel and directly into her pasteurization vat, never sees the light of day. If we would have had to transfer it to a trailer and then get it to her, they would have asked her to cool it. But it's because it never was exposed to anything, that it got there, that we were lucky enough to have not thought that through, and that's why we wanted the tunnel, but that became the most important part of the tunnel. The other thing that we wanted the tunnel for is it has all the water treatment equipment, stores all the guts for her cheese processing facility, and we wanted to take the whey back. A lot of artisanal cheese producers will treat whey as a waste, and it's spread on the field for fertilizer, and it's not really waste. But we believed that there was more value to it than that, and in fact in commodity cheese plants in many cases whey has more value than the cheese that's being produced, but that takes more processing than we're able to do. So we still wanted to take it and use it. So in the tunnel we have two drains. One is for the wash waste that she uses, and that's all treated, but the other drain collects the whey, and then we pump that back through the tunnel into an insulated tank, and then it's added to our cow's feed mix. And our nutritionist sampled it, had it tested, and calculated that by feeding it back to the cows, we would save about 9 cents per cow per day in feed cost. That adds up. And whey has a lot of good things in it for dairy cows. Has a good amino acid profile, has some protein, some starch, and things that add to their feed ration, and it adds moisture to their feed ration. And cows love their feed mix to be between 50 and 55% moisture, and so that adds that to the feed mix. And on top of it all, we got a nice storm shelter out of our tunnel. So this is our lactating barn. It's a freestall barn, meaning that cows are free to walk around wherever they want. They can go get water when they want, feed when they want, and then stall, which also means bed. There is a bed for every cow in here, and that's important. It's important for them, and it's important to me as a dairy farmer. And a lot of science has gone into that stall to make it attractive for a cow, because as a farmer, I want her to lay down 12 to 14 hours a day. So our stalls, bedded, the bedding in them is about 12 inches deep with washed sand. It's very comfortable for a cow, so that when she's ready, she'll go to that stall and lay down. And that's important. Takes pressure off her feet and legs. And then if you've been paying attention, you noted earlier that I said that a cow's stomach has 4 compartments. And I talked about 3 of them. I didn't talk about the 4th one. When a cow lays down, the 4th one really kind of comes into action. When a cow eats, she grabs feed and swallows, and you can see that if you watch a cow a little bit, that she's not chewing it. She grabs feed and swallows, and then feed passes over the top of the reticulum on the way to the rumen. Heavy particles will fall into the reticulum, and it's the smallest and most heavily muscled part of this cow's stomach, and it's always churning. And so it creates a ball out of that feed, and when a cow lays down, she will have an automatic reflex to regurgitate that ball, and then she chews it. And that's important, because as she chews, she's creating saliva. And saliva has a neutral pH, and all the bacteria that are in the rumen that are so important need to be in a neutral pH environment in order to survive and thrive. So as a dairy farmer, I want that cow producing anywhere from 14 to 40 gallons of saliva every day. And when my nutritionist is here, one of the things he will do is he'll count how many cows are laying down, how many are chewing their cud. And he'd like to see at least 7 out of 10 cows chewing, and that helps him to analyze whether the feed ration he computed for them is actually healthy for that cow. So that's one of the important things we do. This barn is cleaned twice every day. Every time that we milk, the barn is cleaned. All the manure is carried out, stored. Like I said earlier, that's an important resource for us. And then all the stall beds are groomed twice a day. We add fresh sand every day in the morning, and then the stalls are groomed and cleaned every evening as well. Thank you for coming and for participating and supporting us in what we do.